and welcome to Business Unusual. We continue talking about socio-geopolitical shifts and impact. And of course, we are saying that these are defined within the borders of new ideas, disruptive technologies, and emerging behaviors. My name is Susan Opio, and my co-host?
My name is Charles Opio.
Now, when you look at the challenge, for those not raised with a digital mindset, it is to learn how to evolve and compete in the new landscape.
Yes, and
what are some of these challenges?
Yes, that's a major challenge because you see, like you said, if you're born analog, you think analog. It's your reasoning, it's your perception. And so suddenly you have to change how you think, and that's a crucial issue. People have to change how they think even before they change how they do.
So you're saying that in a time like this,
yes,
we continue talking, of course, analog versus digital, and you're saying that in the analog mentality, you're saying this person has a calling.
Absolutely.
To stop everything they are doing and get relevant.
Completely.
Yes.
Realize the world changed. It's like learning a new language.
Yes.
Everything changed. You can't force your old thinking on this.
Yes.
And you see where you came from, you got quality from the experience you had. In the digital world, your experience could be a hindrance.
Okay.
Everything is changing.
Yes.
And we can look at one of the issues. Let's look at the governmental level, for example. And I'll go back some years ago because of technology we were involved in, when what then was called calling over the internet.
So are you saying, by giving that example, are you saying you were born analog?
Absolutely.
And you had to shift it to digital?
In fact, I became digital while still analog, and it confused many people.
Okay.
In fact, it was unheard of for somebody in my sphere to be thinking digital.
So there is hope.
There is hope for many. There is hope for many.
Yes.
And I remember those days when calling over the internet came. Most governments call it an illegal activity.
Yes.
And tried to shut it down.
Yes, we used to have businesses that are operating under the waters.
Absolutely.
You know, because they could not say we do calls.
Exactly. And I even know, no names mentioned anywhere, that when it was time, they had to employ and get a digital company, organization, to help them catch the digital people who are making calls over the internet.
Is that how we are talking about? Listen, we are talking about analog versus digital. That we are in a season when we have digital mindset colliding with analog.
Absolutely.
All right? The problem we are having is that as we transition from analog to digital, the analog mindsets are the decision makers.
Exactly.
Now, you can imagine this person coming and telling you, now we don't need to do these internet calls.
Exactly.
Go and just get all these companies and shut them down.
And here's the problem. When the government, thinking analog, tries to control economic activity, instead of seeing opportunity in the new economic activity. Because the same government that used to fight against calling over internet, today, because to them, phone calls were the primary business, analog calls.
Yes.
That's what they saw threatened.
The call is in my office. Call me tomorrow at 10 because I will be in my office.
Exactly. And our business is telco. That's what we do.
Okay.
Suddenly they realized people are calling without going through their system. Instead of asking how does that work, analog mind things of how do we stop it.
Does that tell us why most of the time, more so in Africa, why the governments are the last ones to catch up with something?
Absolutely.
Because of the mentalities that are running government.
Yes.
Yeah?
I will not mention a local country in Africa that is shutting down internet during elections, not knowing there are things like VPN.
Yes.
Two different worlds.
I think when you're talking about analog versus digital, even though people who are analog, they don't sit down with digital and ask.
Exactly.
If I shut down internet during election, is there another way you guys can do it? Because this generation coming up,
they'll find a solution.
Go behind your back and they will have...
You know why? Because analog doesn't reason the way the digital world reasons. The digital world is a world of access to information. Okay. So you better change your information, not the access.
Because the information that you're really keeping,
they will access it.
They will access it.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about this. When you talk about, again, analog versus digital, you see things like drones.
Absolutely.
Of course, right now in Africa, many countries will not allow drones. But a time cometh that drones will be normal activity.
Well, fortunately, some countries, ours included, realized you can't fight technology. You'd rather license it. When you license technology, now that's the idea of a digital economy. In a digital economy, you look at how to turn something into an economy. Every emerging technology, you look for a process and a place where it adds value and where it can bring revenue.
Not fight it.
If you fight it, it will beat you. We live in a digital world. You can't win. You can't win anymore.
So we are saying that right now, talking about developing countries, coming into the next level is you as a government acknowledging we're in a digital time. We need to catch up.
Absolutely.
We need to acknowledge these things. We need to accept them.
You know? Network technology has dismantled all artificial barriers. We live in a world today where information, knowledge, even money moves digitally. Assets are no longer physical. Everything is shifting. Services, everything is moving on a digital highway, so to speak. In fact, let's call it a super highway. With no traffic.
No traffic, not all stations. Let's talk about that free global flow again of information. Let's talk about that.
Yes, you see, the thing is, there is now what used to be, like I said, in an analog world. If you wrote a book, that book, until I get hold of it physically, I don't have it. So there were preservers of knowledge. There were owners of knowledge. So we could have argued that let libraries remain library, and if you want to read this book because it's so important,
you must come here.
You must come here. It became obvious you can't beat digital. So we decided to make it available. And suddenly we began to realize knowledge should not be necessarily paid for. What you do with it is what should be paid for.
Please explain. Because that's where many people are still being beaten. When somebody says, I've written my book and I want my book used in the universities, they must buy the hard copies. I mean, how do you work with that?
It's not going to happen. The value, yes, when you move to digital, there is a way your book can be monetized. But it changes. Now, let's give an example between analog selling of books and digital, and why the old model is crazy. It's called the snail model. The snail model says it will take you X number of days of X copywriters and people to analyze your book and do whatever, get the final print, take it to a printer, they must read the whole book, do everything about it, come back, publish how many copies, transport. I'm tiring you deliberately. I'm just trying to show you how analog works. Now, digital authors work differently. Write a book, email it to the whoever, all the people who are collaborating with you. In real time, while you're writing the rest of it, they're editing parts of it. By the time you arrive at the end of your book, they've proofread all of it. And nowadays, we even have tools that can do that for you, leave alone people, analytical tools. Send it to the publisher in real time, have it published, Amazon, whatever, in real time, which means in a week, a book can be completed. So it's not a matter, it took me 3 years to write the book. No, it took you 3 years to research the book. Writing the book does not take 3 years. It's a different story. Then Amazon says, look, we'll only give you $2.
For your book.
I'll give
which
you $2.
You thought, from an analog mentality, it should go for 10.
Because you're thinking per book. That's your reasoning. You're thinking boxes and cartons. Analog is telling you the difference is this. If you sell it the way you normally would sell it, by the way, Amazon began by selling physical books. People don't know that, and transporting it. It will take you 6 years to be a bestseller. On a digital platform, it will take you 6 minutes to be a bestseller. And it's $2 times 1 million readers, which you'd never have made in your entire life. In the idea of how long you're selling your books.
So I think it's a matter of, when you talk about disruptive technologies, talking to the analog and letting them understand you are not losing by becoming digital. You might be selling it $1. But you're selling to 1 million people
in the shortest time.
In a week.
Remember we did the last recording? Computerization, increased speeds, increased bandwidth, increased reach, networking, real time. We are doing things. I mean, I remember, if you grew up analog, as some of us did, and we have a disrupting she grew up analog, whatever she tries to tell you, she grew up analog. What used to happen, we used to be amazed when we watched a program on TV, we didn't know it was 20 years old.
It just reached us.
It had just
Finally,
reached us.
It has just landed.
So we were impressed. So by the time digital technology shifted and our stars, appeared, they were so old.
I think also what was disruptive was you've been watching this young person.
Yes.
And then you get this news 6 months later that this person passed on.
Yeah.
And they passed on at 90. And you're like, okay, wait, who are we watching? You know, okay, I'm just exaggerating.
You know, one of those...
But they were old.
Yeah, one of those case in points,
yes.
Anybody who's watched Sound of Music, we loved it until we saw the cast.
Yes.
And we realized how old they were.
Thank God for technology. Thank God for technology.
And so that's the difference.
But we're talking about shifting strategies. And
yes.
Let's look at nations with aging population
yes.
and a declining birth rate. Let's talk about
that is
aging population.
Declining birth rate.
Yes.
Those are real nations. They are nations who, in their great strategic planning, had reduced, because of economic structure and everything they did, they began to manage the childbirth.
Yes.
They began to manage everything. They developed. They became powerfully economic nations. What has happened is that years later, they've realized that their population is majority older.
Older.
Than younger.
Yes.
That already means that the majority is analog. All right? Yes. So the reasoning of that, because it's your country, you can't establish certain technologies because they will not find use. All right? So in those technologies, the most important things are things like retirement.
That's what they talk, healthcare.
Healthcare.
Yes.
You know, that's what you invest in. And so suddenly you realize you didn't think ahead. We talked about thinking ahead.
Yes.
And it never struck you that you will have an entire generation retiring at the same time.
And there's a generational gap.
Yes.
Because now we are saying that if a country has majority old people,
yes.
there is definitely a gap.
Exactly.
And again, we are saying that if you are an analog, you as a government are saying we do not allow people, we do not, immigration rules are so stiff.
Yes.
Now you're coming to a place where you're begging countries,
please come.
Give us your people.
Please
we are looking
because
for
we
this.
Can't give birth on time to close the gap.
You won't birth and raise and train.
It's impossible.
Yes.
Now such governments are finding themselves in a new crisis. When you have a large, and you might wonder how this affects you. If you want to invest in a country with this demographic, you have to know about it.
Yes.
Otherwise, your powerful product might be useless. This is the whole idea. So what happens, you have a scenario where you have that age group, okay? Yes. The problem is that now with that age group, you are now reducing the people who can work to keep that economy going. That economy was run by this age group that is retiring. Now you have a new problem. The problem of paying them their benefits and now taking care of them. And so what some governments have resorted to, maybe if you watch news, and you need to start watching international news to see how it affects you, is you'll see many governments, there are strikes by elderly people. You wonder, why would elderly people go on strike? Because the government wants to extend retirement age. Oh, yes. Because they don't have the money.
Because when you talk about 60 being the retirement age, and you have this whole population coming to you, you now get wiser and say, listen, let's make it 70.
Yes.
Or whatever age. Why? We are trying to push because we cannot afford to retire all of them at the same time.
Yes.
Yeah?
And the only way you do that, you start encouraging healthcare. Yes. Eat well. You don't want people dying on you.
Yes.
You want everybody to arrive.
You realize when we talk about this is a problem. It's actually a problem. Now listen, when we talk about the young people in Africa, research says that in the next 30 years, majority of African population will be the youth.
Yes.
And the youth here is 35.
Yes.
Not the youth of 55.
And that youth will be more than 60 or 70% of the world's population.
Say that again, because we are in Africa, talking to African business people, more so the kingdom business people. So that when we talk about planning and seeing ahead, like Joseph, you can now start planning knowing very well. 30 years.
Most people don't know that by 2050, that's how far we have to think, Africa will have the largest population in the world.
Yes.
In the world. Think of the implication.
Yes.
Now, majority of Africa is being run by analog leaders. Do you think they are ready?
They are not.
You see, we keep saying we need to change the leaders. Listen, you can play musical chairs with all the analog leaders you want.
There will be no change.
Same result.
There will be no change.
Same result.
And that is why we said earlier, woe unto you if you are a digital young person thinking analog. Because even if we elect you, you're taking us back to the same problem.
Actually, majority of young people who actually run in politics spend time being nurtured analog.
Yes. that they don't prepare for digital.
So by the time they arrive at the top of politics,
yes,
they are just a new, efficient version of analog.
A younger analog.
A younger version of analog.
And let's talk about this, especially what we said about Africa, having the highest population of the young people.
Yes.
Now, right now, when we talk of Africa, when we see our population, it's actually a problem.
Absolutely.
You can feed them, you can take them to school. Now think, if you are a nation in the West that has older population, do you realize they will educate Africa?
There's no
because
option.
They need you.
There's no option.
Then tomorrow what do you say? We have scholarships.
Absolutely.
Take them.
They're everywhere. They need you.
Know, they need you.
Now what has happened, contrary to people's thinking, COVID has been a blessing to Africa. And I'll explain why. Simple reason. We used to wait for governments to take for us schools in the villages. See how we think? Bring the school, not education.
Give us a school.
There's a difference.
Yes.
Our focus was schools. Our focus was never education. All right? Now, that became a predicament. Politicians promise forever. They know they'll never do it, but we keep electing them. The business environment also runs under that, analog business. Because some of you are waiting for the schools to reopen so you can go back to supplying milk and supplying bread. Because you can't think outside that.
Outside of that.
You can't reason outside of that model. And so that model becomes a problem. Now with COVID, what happens? A new disruption. Who said you must go to school to go to school?
You can have homeschooling.
Remember what we said, disruption. New technologies, speed, all those things are issues.
Yes.
So a digital thinking government will say, we don't need to spread schools. We need to spread technology. It's cheaper.
Because education, like you say, there's a very big difference between going to school and getting an education.
Simple.
Most of the African analog, let me say, mentality leaders emphasized we go to school.
Thank you.
Not to get an education.
Nobody cares.
But to pass through school.
You went through school. Not understanding that school was designed to keep you for 4 years while they think about what to do.
With next.
Or 6 years. Because there's nowhere to take you.
Yeah.
Now, if we shift to another way of thinking, where we move away from building the school, but take infrastructure to our villages, take technology, allow children, they'll never stop learning. School is no longer a place.
And it becomes fun.
School becomes a life.
And people realize this is our life.
Yes.
This is not something we do for 10 years.
Absolutely.
This is something we do for life.
And what has happened? The technology developers have come to a realization. They need people who know how to use the technology.
Yes.
So they are offering you free education.
So talk of open source now.
Yes.
That is where when you come to Africa and you find still analog mentality.
Yep.
Because I invested in your business, I'm insisting we must sell.
Exactly.
You are telling me as a digital innovator that no, we need to be open sourced.
Yes.
You know?
So that everybody can use this to develop more resources, which in the end develops more business. In the end, business is what people want, not jobs. In other words, if I have a business, I have created jobs.
Yes.
If I'm looking for a job, then how many people are not going to get jobs? Because let's do some simple maths. That's why I thought that's why we went to school. We went to school that tells you very simply. Have you ever played musical chairs? Most of our education systems across Africa is like musical chairs of 100 people with 10 seats. Try that game. There's going to be people breaking people's legs. There's going to be people doing whatever. Why? Because we are told primary school, 100 million people. High school can only take 50 million.
Yes.
University can take 10 million, and jobs can take 1 million. Show me the math.
It's not working. And that is why we are saying that when you talk about socio-geopolitical shifts and their impact, looking at nations, developing nations.
Exactly.
Let's talk about that. When you talk about developing nations with faster growing and younger
populations. So their solution must be different. They must start upgrading education models, not schools.
Here we are talking about, remember, we have not lost our narrative.
Yes.
We are talking about kingdom business.
Yes.
How you have to come and think that this is a developing nation. It has a faster growing and younger population. What do they need? Number one, you're talking about
education models. Education models means What does the future look like? Who do we need? How do we prepare them? Simple.
That's the education we're talking about.
That's the education we're talking about.
So you are saying also, when you talk about this kingdom business person sitting here, looking at the future,
yes,
and seeing that we can tell that Africa, yes, we have the highest population,
yes,
in the next 30 years.
Absolutely.
But we are saying that the West will need 1, 2, 3.
Exactly.
So what do we need in Africa? Now, I should stop investing based on what I knew, but based on what I know now.
Absolutely.
Okay?
And we have to stop exporting slaves.
Let's talk about that.
We have to stop that. You see, in the past,
talk about that.
In the past, the West took slaves from Africa. Now Africa is exporting slaves.
Willingly.
Willingly.
We are all lining up for visas, but we don't realize we are going as slaves. And that's what we started by saying, that the first thing this developing nation need is upgrade educational models.
Yes. Who told you the West needs more waiters? Who told you they need more nurses? After a while, there'll be no aging population. Because that's the only reaction we know.
Yes.
Those economies need sophistication, thinking, reasoning. So how many people go out to the West to work in those jobs? Very few.
Yes.
And that's the mindset we have to stop. It's called exporting slaves. Because we didn't prepare them. Our education models, what happens? Remember the funnel I spoke about?
Yes.
As the funnel throws people out, primary, everything,
yes,
those are the slaves that you now send out.
Yes.
But had they been taught something different, they'd be going out because there's a demand for them.
Yes.
So that they're not going to survive or to hide in the systems. But they are going to function because they are needed.
Yes.
Until we start thinking like that.
So as a developing nation, you are saying,
yes,
the first thing, when you're looking at the future,
yes,
let's think of the young people today.
What
so
are
looking
they
at that 5-year-old, you're
yes,
talking about how do we start an educational system, model that this person will thrive.
Yes.
By the time we are the future comes, that future we are talking about, this person is ready.
Simple. How many of you are teaching your 7-year-olds to think? That's a simple question.
Yes.
Because we don't. It doesn't fit. All the professional training organizations we have train managers, not leaders.
Yeah.
Think about it.
So I think we are talking about that. When you talk of disruption,
yes,
this is what we are talking about.
Absolutely.
That Africa, we are coming to a place where we are stopping training managers,
yes,
and start training leaders.
Absolutely.
And leaders here is not one who leads in a corporation or organization.
No.
Is one who comes up
to chart a pathway.
To chart.
To create a place people can follow them to.
That is a leader.
Even our terminology for leader is analog. It has to be removed.
Yes. Actually, that's why I wanted you to talk about that.
It's removed.
Yes.
Our model of leader means somebody who's fought their way to the top, who is lording over and controlling everybody else.
Now we are talking about somebody who is charting a path
that people can follow.
And he has vision. He can see into the future.
Yes.
He can see what will be in demand in 10 years, in 20, in 30 years. Now, talking about education models, creating employment, and providing effective health and care systems.
Of course.
Yeah?
Now, what does that mean? Let's take two issues. One, when we talk about creating employment is not jobs in government.
Yes.
Creating employment is creating a nation of entrepreneurs who, as they develop things, automatically what they develop will require others. And that becomes an efficient system.
Yes.
So the government should be training young people to create jobs, not promising them jobs.
Not promising them jobs. And again, as a government, we are saying that the government should not work on infrastructure.
Simple.
Where you empower these young people
to do well,
to have a platform where they can do well.
I mean, you tell me, if you take fiber into the village and power into the village and a road into the village, watch.
They will not ask for jobs.
Watch.
They will create jobs.
Of course.
They will create jobs, yeah.
It's as simple as that. Infrastructure is the problem. So that should be the focal point, not jobs.
Yes.
I don't know why people said government should create jobs. That's analog thinking. Government should create opportunities, not jobs.
Yes.
Because that's how innovation and creativity increases and becomes better and better.
Yes.
Now, talking about effective health systems. Effective health system is not anticipating sickness. Because most of us think, give us more hospitals. In other words, let's get sicker and sicker.
Yes.
Effective health systems means teaching people nutrition. In fact, the greatest schoolmaster is called COVID.
Yes.
Our hospitals are now at 12 capacity. Why? Because people are hygienic. 90% of sickness was unhygienic behavior.
Talking about health systems, the government should be teaching health awareness campaigns.
And infrastructure and taking care of the garbage and the things that cause trouble. Don't wait for people to get sick so that you can do business. But you see, because analog business was based on problems. You know, it's interesting that the generation I grew up in marketing, we trained people and we told them that the work of a marketer is to solve problems. Now we are changing. The work of an innovator is to create solutions, an entirely different ballgame.
So your mind, your sight is on a solution-based.
And your solution shouldn't be a reaction to problems. Your solution should be betterment of life.
That's why we are talking about Joseph, and we say that Joseph foresaw something, and he now came up with a solution. So if you found him doing his innovation and his technologies of the day, it was based on something he has seen. Still talking about social geopolitical shift and impact. How are we going to handle this? How are we going to navigate this as kingdom business people? This is business unusual. Keep tracking.